So there's two ways to think about this. One, if your view of this is that it's like an employee and you task it with something, you don't expect it to be done instantaneously. Like I wouldn't expect if I gave you if Jay, we're working on a data center model, like I wouldn't expect you to have it right now in 5 seconds. but but to be honest with you, my expectation when I use these agent things is like I don't want to wait. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Circuit. I am Ben Bajarin.
Greetings, programs. I am Jay Goldberg.
All right, we had some action-packed week with some earnings and some news. The first bit of news that kind of, I think, interestingly, brought a lot of life back to the AI trade, particularly around Nvidia and AMD, was that both the companies now have approval to send modified versions or modified architectures of their chipsets to China. That was well received. Both stock were up pretty big, I believe, on Tuesday when that happened. But obviously, the question, right, that I got from others, and I was ended up being on Yahoo on the set since I was in New York this week, so I was on stage with Josh Lipton, which was fun, and we talked about this, and it was interesting because when you talk to some of these finance news anchors, you talk to a lot of the bankers, right? The bankers come on their shows. He had told me, he's like, a lot of people were surprised by this. And I was like, really? Like, this shouldn't have been surprising. Like, you should have known that we were working to resolution here and these companies were not going to be locked out of China forever. And at the end of the day, both Lisa Su and Jensen were, for lack of a better term for me, politicking as best they could to help make their case and make the administrations know that their business would be hurt not being in China. And I think Jensen has publicly stated, the China market he's estimated roughly to be 50 billion in value over time, not immediately, but that's his TAM, for the market. But a lot of people got really worked up, right, about Huawei's accelerators, saying, oh, they're going to be good enough, and China's still continuing, and they're not going to give up on Huawei, right? They're not going to give up on their own manufacturing. But I do think that there is a lot of developers there, the Tencents, the Baidus, they're hyperscalers who do want to be running on Nvidia and to some degree AMD. So I think this was well liked news. Like I said, it wasn't a surprise to me. It felt like we were working toward this resolution. The question then becomes, right now, the dynamic of local competition from Huawei and others versus Nvidia and AMD going forward with variants of their products that are not, the highest performance like they'll sell in other markets.
Yeah, so I think politicking is absolutely, lobbying is probably the right word for what Jensen has been doing. He's been very, very vocal. At Computex, he gave us an earful about China and his lost opportunity there, and he said, we used to have 95% share in China. Now it's 50% after the ban. Yep. Right. I have a feeling he's going to forget that number pretty soon. Now that he's selling there, he's going to have great share in China, and forget that he was at 50%. So yeah, and then I think they announced the waiver in conjunction with the U.S. government announcing something around AI data center investment. Yeah. So it's very, very political. This is all very political, right? And I think the interesting. I'm glad to see that AMD got a waiver too,
right?
For their China variant. The thing that confuses me a little bit is at Computex, Jensen specifically said they had gotten waivers for the B400, 540. I forget. There's a China variant of Blackwell 2. And at Computex, he said they had waivers, but then like a couple weeks later on earnings, he was they were a little bit vaguer about it. They didn't explicitly say they had waivers. They said they were trying to get waivers. And then it hasn't been confirmed, but there were press reports that they had gotten waivers for other parts, unspecified. So my suspicion is that they have a waiver to keep selling Blackwell too. It'd be kind of weird if they didn't get both, but like who knows? So there's a little bit of a weirdness around that, which I just point out because I think it's important to keep track of all this, and this is all political. I think it is a little bit surprising in that what it signals for the broader China-U.S. trade war, because there have been a few things that have happened. We're going to get into one of them in a minute that have sort of been positive progress in China, U.S. commercial activity in China that have gotten approved and things have gotten flowing again, which makes some people think that maybe there's a bigger China deal in the works, and who knows? But I think that's why it's interesting what it says about sort of broader U.S.-China relations.
Yeah. No, I agree, and like I said, the point I brought up with the Yahoo guys, and I caught up with some of my investment banker friends at some of the big banks while I was in New York. Was really just that the competitive points there is what I'm going to watch, because I don't think anybody believes China's going to give up on still trying to manufacture and do their own stuff. So the competitive mix to me is interesting, because while we have a competitive mix here, we kind of don't, right? Nvidia is really the only merchant ASIC at any scale, right? And AMD is tiny in comparison. There are Huawei implementations, right, at clouds there. So my point is, I feel like it's it's a more interesting competitive dynamic for Nvidia there than it is here, and that to me is interesting.
Yeah, certainly if they have 50% share there, that's something to keep an eye on. I think you said it right before, which is all the deep seeks of the world of China, all the people trying to build foundational mobs, the Alis and the Baidus who are trying to build foundational models would rather have Nvidia.
Exactly. I mean, developers, right? Their developers are clamoring for it, but again, it is for lack of a better term, truncated architecture, whereas Huawei and others don't have the handcuffs on themselves. So we'll see, right? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, if you look at what the Huawei stuff is capable of, there's been some analysis. They put out some data. Semi-analysis did a good workup of it too. You just look at what the Huawei Ascend, the 910C can do. It's clearly a fairly sizable performance gap between that and Blackwell. It's huge between that and Blackwell, and it's pretty close on a Hopper. But they have some really interesting things. Like they can do clusters of I forget how many. Currently, Nvidia is like 72 GPUs in one cluster, and Huawei can do like 200. I'm getting the numbers wrong, but it's something on that scale where they can actually cluster a lot. And so push comes to shove, if the constraint is GPUs, then Huawei stuff is good enough. You may have to build 4 times as many data centers. Yeah. But China can do that, and they have the electricity to do that.
Right. But to be honest with you, I actually think about Huawei kind of in the same way that we should think about, or we think about the custom ASICs, right? They're purpose built. They're designed for specific workloads. This is the TPUs and Amazon custom silicon of the world, right? So it's not that dissimilar. And I also wonder, like, maybe Huawei's opportunity is some version of customizing for the hyperscalers, right? In the same way that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I disagree. I think if Huawei, the big constraint on Huawei today is their access to Foundry, right? They can get stuff out of TSMC, but it's getting harder, and so they're stuck with SMIC's 7, 5, whatever nanometer node, which is very low yielding. That's the big constraint. I think absent that constraint, they would be a really scary Nvidia competitor. At least in China, maybe other places too. But if they had access to leading edge Foundry, they're super capable. Huawei is really, really capable. That's why I was pointing out, like, they have features in their system that aren't available, that are better specs than what Nvidia offers. Right? Things that aren't necessarily as dependent on advanced packaging, just sort of networking stuff. They're really good at that. And I think, I don't get me started on Huawei. I could talk for an hour on Huawei. It's very interesting what they're doing, and their relationship in that ecosystem they're, they have there's a lot of pressure from high up in the Chinese government for everybody to use Huawei. Huawei has no end of demand for its products. It just can't produce enough. And I think if they were unfettered, it would be very different outlook.
Right.
I think the big thing really that is going to protect NVIDIA to a large degree is CUDA and the software libraries. And I know that's controversial because some people say, "Oh, DeepSeek got underneath CUDA." Yeah, okay, but still, it's still important for the developer ecosystem, right? And that's that's the point a lot of people make. Like Ben Thompson makes this point a lot. Is like we really should be selling NVIDIA to China,
of course,
to protect, to keep a U.S. role in this, right? And if you cut off NVIDIA to China, then that's going to open up competition, and then people are going to come up with the software alternatives, and those software alternatives will leak out to the rest of the world. Better to have everybody wanting to use Blackwell and
I think
Hopper and building around that.
I think we're all in agreement of that. So let the lobbying, politicking continue for Nvidia and AMD. All right. Also, TSMC had earnings this week. I think there was a lot of kind of optimism. Also, some questions around, I guess, some of the either commentary around demand and or digestion phase in 2026 that also came out around ASML's earnings the week before. So yeah, what were your? I know you followed the call. What were your top level takes of TSMC, other than that they raised annual guidance above what most of the buy side was expecting for this year? So positives there, but there were some interesting debates around outlook.
Yeah, I mean, TSMC put in a really good set of numbers, sort of everything above expectations, guidance, profitability was pretty good. Reading through the transcript, like the big story is of course AI, and they talked that up and talked all about tokenization and the crazy amount of tokens that have been used, right? And that by far was the big. Everything else was pretty much in line, right? All the other categories were in line. Not exciting, but AI was driving the one thing driving everything. I thought the other thing that stood out for me was when they talk about profitability, right? Their model is based on full utilization, and they would have actually had really, really strong margins this quarter because of the utilization was so high, but they have this currency headwind working against them, and that sort of dampened the margin upside they would have otherwise used. And I think I wrote a piece about this, but I didn't post it because currencies is a big deal here. Like, this my thesis is TSMC's had 20 years advantage in part because of a suppressed currency. And one of the side effects of the trade wars and the tariffs that are coming out was that the Taiwan currency, the NT dollar, appreciated against the dollar by not a lot, but like 5-6%, and it was like everyone was very nervous about that. It was a big move because it kind of came in one day, and it undermined a lot of like the Taiwanese financial system. We don't have to get into the topic of Taiwanese life insurers, but like there was some messiness there, and it's clearly impacting TSMC. Like it's not a big deal. It's not that big a move. They're probably 20% under misvalued against the U.S. dollar. So a 5% move doesn't really change that, but it was enough to sort of like freak people out a little bit. It was a big topic of conversation when I was there in June. So worth paying attention to. Currency moves were a factor.
I mean, what did you take from the, again, there was a lot of people making comments around ASML, kind of their outlook, felt like there was some cloudiness, murkiness into what they said about 26, and obviously it's the middle of 2025. So how much can we really see in terms of 2026? But it doesn't seem like. But I have seen some very conservative forecasts, financial forecasts that do suggest a quote unquote digestion year in 2026 around AI infrastructure. I find that hard to believe, but I've seen it. So I don't know. It's intriguing to me that I guess there's not commentary that's sort of like, we're not going to catch up with this demand really anytime soon. And I don't know, what was sort of your take on that?
So let's split those out because they're multiple things going on here. For TSMC, the picture they painted was one of just up and to the right, very strong demand, right? They reiterated their capex for the year,
Big, yeah.
which is a big number, 40 something billion dollars. And that's, they've been spending $10 billion a quarter, $10 billion a quarter this year already, and they're going to, keep spending through the rest of the year. One of the things that really I thought was just amazing was the number of plants they're building.
Yeah.
I've lost count, but they're building it's like 11 fabs and 4 packaging plants in Taiwan, something like that, and they're building a bunch. They're expanding capacity in Japan for automotive. They're going to build something eventually in Germany that seems to be progressing at European pace, and then Arizona. I mean, they're on fire in Arizona.
Increasing,
I was really
speed there.
They're increasing. They're going to make Arizona a gigafab cluster, right? Which is I don't think they've talked about that before, but it's going to be, again, it's going to be. Let's see if I have the number. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's they're building. They have plans to take it all the way through their existing roadmap. So they're going to build fabs for each of the next couple nodes that are coming out. They said that after all that's complete, and they're going to build packaging too. So after all that's done, and they have the gigafab up and running in Arizona, it's 3-4 year time horizon. At that point, 30% of 2 nanometer capacity in advanced packaging will be in Arizona. Right, massive numbers. Like they're remember, like, it was only like a year ago where everyone's like, oh, are they really going to do this in the U.S.? Are they really going to build capacity? They're building a lot of capacity in the U.S. A big bet on the U.S. and it's all coming from customer demand. So that's Apple and Nvidia and probably AMD can all say that they have parts that are made in America. Certainly, this tariff stuff has spooked people to encourage more of that. And they said that the Arizona plants are yielding at a comparable level to Taiwan.
Right.
Another big question: can they actually manufacture the same level? And they are. So, I mean, I guess what I'm coming down at is just the extent to which TSMC is just executing. It's just an incredible execution machine. It blew me away. They're how much they're just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and you don't make those kind of statements, capex requirements, and fab build-outs if you don't believe you can keep them cranking out at capacity for the foreseeable future. And the crazy thing is, honestly, they could probably be building 4 to 5 more foundries than they are, and fabs than they are, and still probably be busy. Like, just the demand that they have is just crazy. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that there shouldn't be concerns even about quote unquote digestion years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about a digestion year. I think it's possible, but also I don't think it's also possible. It's very much in the other direction. What I will say is, just in terms of what they can control, so not end demand, but just what they can control, they're doing really well, right? They're building all this capacity. They're a conservative company. They're not going to build capacity if they don't have a really strong indication of demand from a bunch of customers. And then on top of that, just in terms of their roadmap, right? The volume N2 goes into volume production second half of this year, right? And I think Apple's the first customer.
Nvidia should be too.
I'm not sure, but it's or AMD.
I mean, Apple will have at least 90%,
N2,
if not more, of year one.
Yeah. And N2P, it's their performance variant of N2, is in volume production the second half of next year. And then their next node, A16, their 1.6 nanometer node, is in volume production also in the second half of next year. Right, and that's their first one with backside power. Right, and so, like, you and I were talking about this before we got on mic, which is Intel's 14A. So Intel has backside power now with 18A, but it's all for internal use. It's supposedly pretty good, but it's only internal use. 14A comes out. I think in the first half of 20. I think it's in volume production in the first half of 27, maybe late 26, but I think it's first half 27, which is, you compare that to A16 at TSMC, comes out second half of 26.
Around the same time.
So somewhere around the same time. That's the fight, right? And then the question will be, when do external customers get access to Intel's 14A? That, I think, that's going to be the critical dynamic. Can Intel get 14A out on time, yielding on time, and when can they get access to customers? Because 18A, which was obviously very messy and now doesn't look like it's going to be available for outside customers at all, even the sort of best, most optimistic scenario was a 1-year lag between internal and external customers for 18A. And I would argue if 14A is also that 1-year lag, that's a little bit dicey. But if they can get external customers on 14A soon after they do it for the internal stuff, then we have a fight.
Yeah,
right. Then
I mean, I think that's the first time, as like we talked about last week, that you should see foundry parity, and it's just up in the air what customers do. But that's going to be to your point, that's going to be the closest they've been competitively at a time where customers can choose them. And, if they have any shot, right, that should be it. Because on paper, it looks like that there'll be a good option, first or second choice, foundry.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering the status of the respective PDKs. I suspect TSMC has shown some portion of that to customers already. I don't know that Intel has. Specs, yes, but I don't know about PDK. That's anyone out there knows, DM me or drop me a line. I'm very curious to see the status of the relative PDKs.
Yeah,
it's early still, but that'll be the warrant. That'll be the very powerful leading indicator. Probably get that sometime next year.
All right. TSMC was good. So let's move on to sort of a broader topic that, yes.
Oh, wait. We should close out on ASML.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. On
the issue, right. So ASML, right. So ASML reported earlier in the week, and they declined to give guidance for next year or any outlook for next year, which, again, to your point, it's kind of far out in the future, but also these are very long lead times on $300 million equipment, so they know what their backlog, their order book looks like for next year. And so TSMC confirmed guidance, CapEx guidance. I think ASML couldn't guide for next year, which leads me to believe that the big problem, of course, is Intel and Samsung. What's their demand for EUV systems? And I don't think anyone knows that answer right now. Right, and I think that's what's going on there. Is it's not TSMC, it's the other two, and their use of EUV.
Because Intel will be the first adopter. TSMC is not going to have high NA. TSMC is going to be more conservative on it, as they always are. So, Yeah, agreed.
I looked at ASML's numbers. I think that's very specific to those two customers.
All right.
It's not
Yeah.
broader.
And the point I keep bringing up about ASML is like, look, generally they produce between 50 and 60 million machines a year. Like, their number's fixed. It's not like that changes. That doesn't go like, all of a sudden we can produce 100. Like, that's just not how it works. So it gets priced in, systems. And so it's like, because we know, right? So, but it's still impressive. Right. I mean, making that machine, which is a technical marvel, to use Jensen Huang's parlance. 50 to 55 of those suckers is already ridiculous, but still. All right. Agents. So I was at AWS Summit this week, and it was all about agents. And I need to caveat everything I'm about to say with, like, we're still early in just generative AI. let alone agentic AI. But everybody wants to talk about agentic AI. And I think there's good reasons that some of us should be in the weeds and testing out these things at scale, trying to figure out what they can and can't do. But a very interesting observation appears with agents that I think has broad implications on the compute landscape as a whole. So this became evident in kind of two things with OpenAI's launch yesterday of their new broad agent, which is a mix between deep research and their agentic software, solution that they had before, their computer use agent. And they had brought up some points about like different use cases. It can go assimilate a bunch of documents from you from Google Drive and then create a PowerPoint presentation, and you could weave your email into that, whatnot. And some people were pointing out, like the engineers who were showing their use cases, that in some cases these things reasoned for like 2 hours. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, okay, so there's two ways to think about this. One, if your view of this is that it's like an employee, and you task it with something, you don't expect it to be done instantaneously. Like I wouldn't expect, if I gave you, if Jay, we're working on a data center model, like I wouldn't expect you to have it right now in 5 seconds. but but to be honest with you, my expectation when I use these agent things is like, I don't want to wait. Like if I'm doing assimilation of documents and it reasons for 15 minutes, and I'm like, dude, why'd you take 15 minutes? Like I'm very curious of your answer to the model that I'm querying you on. But one, I say that because it shows how far ahead software is from compute. When my guess is, right, say that right now a benchmark, and Max on my team is trying this. We're like, take a document, build a financial model, and then make a PowerPoint presentation. Like, how long does that take, right? So maybe next year it doesn't take 2 hours. Maybe it takes 1 hour, right? Whatever it is, right? Look, progress on time for workloads. But the other interesting part is that a lot of these agentic workflows, at least with the very basic things we use today. So say it's saying like, go research an Airbnb. A lot of people gave this example of like, go research Airbnb, put all your parameters, say I want to stay here, I want it to be by the beach, I want a number of things that I want to be able to do in close proximity, and I want the price to be this. And so it would go to Airbnb's website and spend time querying Airbnb's website. And what, in this particular use case, Airbnb's website was very slow. Like it didn't respond to the agent fast enough. And what that got me thinking was, there's a strong case to be made, and I mean, I think I'm making it, that even the general purpose, so Intel's CPUs in general purpose infrastructure and AMD's need to be upgraded to keep up with agents, because those just basic websites, those basic e-commerce sites, those transaction sites that are running in AWS or Azure or wherever, right? Running their websites, running their email, running their SaaS, like that's a bottleneck for the agent because it can't interact with those things as fast. And so I think that my meta point here is that all the infrastructure needs to be upgraded as we move to agentic AI, because we don't want websites that can't keep up with our agents and slow our agents down when they're using web-based applications or web-based software for the task at hand. And I think that, again, just comes back to even the general purpose cloud stuff, even the general purpose CPUs need to be upgraded and in some way future architected to work with agents, right? In ways that they weren't built and the infrastructure is not there for today to take advantage of these agents that are going to move at 100 times a human on their website.
I think it's a broader problem than just the compute. I hear what you're saying, and I think it's there's a broader issue. It is a function of integrating business models, right? You want your agents to be able to go out and do all kinds of stuff, but that means it has to interact with other companies, systems, and data, and they're going to have to make changes. And yeah, it's going to require more compute, and everyone's going to have to invest in that. But there's just a very sort of first level problem of can the agent, does the other site allow the agent to go on it, right? And how does it interact with that? And how does the agent know what goes on the other site, right? And we saw this problem came out 2 years ago at CES, or a year and a half ago at CES, when they had all those AI pins, and they would do demos, and they'd say, all right, show me, I want to take a picture of this piece of clothing. Okay, I like it, buy it for me. And you're like, oh, that's so simple. But the real world doesn't work that way, right? There is identity and payment and shopping carts and all that, multiple steps. And AI is going to have to figure out how to integrate with the rest of the world. I don't want to say the real world, because it's going to be all digital, but like has to integrate with that. And I to me, it really reminds me of Web 1.0 versus Web 2.0, right? We had Pets.com and Webvan and Alta Vista. All of those had to die for us to get Google and Amazon,
absolutely
and
right,
Facebook, right? And a big part of that transition was for Amazon getting the warehouses and the distribution settled, and for Google it was like figuring out how to like absorb all the data and crawl all the data on the web. Right, and I think we have to go through that level of transition, and that's why I'm open to this idea of at some point we're going to have a digestion year, and whether that's next year or the year after, it's coming. Because this is the kind of problem that's not solved by computers; it's solved by lawyers, and so the rate of change is going to slow down, even if the lawyers are.
I guess
now
what makes
all
this
AI.
Interesting though, and everybody's just gonna see the trade-off that Ben makes to be an early adopter is like, I told GPT operator, like agent, like, yeah, I logged into all my services for you. So like, go work on my behalf. Like I gave it permissions. I logged in. So like it can go reserve me an Airbnb. It can go make a flight. It's like to that service, it just looks like a human. It's just that thing is moving at speeds that I cannot. And me and my mouse just can't operate, right? And so that's where I get to your point. I agree. I don't know if it stays that way, but that's the way it is right now. And that's a bottleneck. Like that slows the output, the execution of what I want it to do down, because that infrastructure is slow. In fact, I saw people sharing this on Twitter when they were using the new agent mode, and they would show you like in the little dashboard, the web page crashed. Like when when it was trying to operate on their behalf, it was like cannot return refreshing web page, and it like just it screwed the service. And so again, my point is this: it just my point is it just shows when we think about the future of AI infrastructure, it's not just these AI factories. It's that like all compute has to be upgraded to keep up with where this is going. Even your basic, what we'll call boring, general purpose software that sits at AWS, Microsoft Azure, and again, which to me is a great sign for AMD and Nvidia. I mean AMD and Intel, because they need to make better, data center CPUs, because they're going to have to keep up with the AI infrastructure and all the agents that are running on the accelerators.
So I have a take on this that's going to sound pessimistic, but is the opposite. Okay. So just bear with me, right? You mentioned the example of Airbnb, right? I know that when I search for a place on Airbnb, I spend a lot of time sort of personally looking through each listing that I'm thinking about. And I crowdsource it. I let my kids do it too. And, I look through all the photos to get a sense of what the place is actually like, right? And I think right now, that's a high level of very, very subtle human intuition being brought to play, and I don't think any agent is capable of doing that. Right? Just having that level of there's a very subtle difference between it. And you can say, "Oh, find me a place with four bedrooms and 3 bathrooms for these dates," and it'll find something. But you don't want that. You want actually the place that has the swimming pool, or doesn't, the bedrooms are actually bedrooms and not like pull-out couches or prison-style bunk bed dungeons.
It's not a rundown motel. That's an Airbnb.
It's not a rundown motel. That's right. And AI can't do that today. But that's why it sounds pessimistic. I actually think at some point the AI systems will be able to do that, and they'll know enough about our preferences, and they'll know, oh, Jay really likes to have a hot tub, and cares about like what the kitchen looks like. at some point it'll get there. And to actually accomplish that, it's going to need a whole lot of compute, and it's going to need a whole lot of memory, because it's going to have to learn me
Yep.
to a very high level. And I think it can. I think it can do that. I think technically it can do that, but there's a lot that has to change.
I totally agree. This to me is the broad vision of I have my own, personal agent that works on my behalf. Like it has to have a ton of personal insights about me. And ultimately, this is my thesis of what Apple's trying to do, whether they do it or not. Because, when everybody has this debate, and, I was on, like I said, I was on Yahoo, and I was on prior to several analysts who are very boisterous and talk about Apple's need to buy Perplexity. And so they were like, does Apple need to buy Perplexity? I was like, guys, Perplexity does not solve Apple's problem. And that's not even the best question. The best question is, what is Apple in a unique position to do with AI? And my argument is that they can have a agent whose domain expertise is Ben. And then it can go work on my behalf for whatever.
Okay. I'm with you in concept, but just a time out here. Hold on one second, because we did an episode 3 weeks ago where Apple had a very different strategy than that, right? Is Apple's future going to be building their own agent that is trained on all of our most personal data, which they have access to on our phone? Or is Apple's future being the platform for everyone else to build those agents?
Well, and I think at the end of the day,
right,
at the abstraction layer of you have an agent that just goes and does things on your behalf, right? There could be lots of them, I mean, that's like my
right. But that's my question. But this is my question at the end of the Apple episode, which was, Apple's got to make up their mind which one are they going to be, and they got to commit to one or the other, and there's already a built-in camp on each side, and they're going to fight themselves to stagnation.
But at the end of the day, I think what we're both saying, right, is that this idea of this like truly domain, expertise on Jay, right, and Ben agent will exist. Who it comes from is the question, right? Who's best positioned to deliver this? I mean, what do you want to say? Like, Jarvis is the best example I have, right? Or HAL 2000 is, in fact, Benedict Evans and I talked about this a lot. That was always the example. Like, we're trying to build one of these things whenever we would do, media together. But that's the vision. But again, even in that, right, to our points, that is a lot of compute, and we're not even near that. And even if we were, I don't think people would be comfortable with it yet. Like, there's an adoption cycle part of this that has to happen as well. So,
yeah.
All right. So there's our rant on, all infrastructure needs to be upgraded. Every bit of compute is the bottleneck and will be for some time. There was 2 other bits of the news. So Synopsys closed with Ansys, which really strengthens their position. In fact, I actually had a couple of conversations with some of the custom semi ecosystem at AWS Summit, because there was some there. A lot of people actually really like Synopsys from an IP standpoint as they go and build out custom products as well. And I thought that was really interesting. That if you need DSP IP, to some degree, if you need some tensor IP, they've built out a good IP portfolio too that sometimes doesn't get talked about enough, that's actually being used in the design tools when you're designing these solutions. And you need to get it from somebody, right? They're in a good spot.
Yeah, a big part of revenue. So, all right, let me take a step back. Synopsys, big maker of EDA tools for designing chips, just closed on the acquisition of Ansys, which is a engineering modeling company, physical world modeling software. I would agree that a big portion of Synopsys' revenue, I think it's about 40% of their revenue, comes from licensing IP. So not selling their EDA software, but they're licensing their IP. Cadence is
I don't think Cadence is as high, but yes, they do it. But
it's not as high. It's not as high, but they and so I think it's tricky because they're all in that. They actually don't like that model. That business is not as profitable as the core EDA business. partly because there's a lot more competition.
Right.
For all of it. But what I hear consistently is if you're building a custom ASIC, oftentimes Cadence's stuff is pretty good. It's good enough, right? It is, there's certain things that you're still going to have to get from Broadcom or Marvell or Siva or whoever. It's not the best in certain categories, but for most things it works pretty well. And for a lot of this IP in ASICs, that's all you need. And so it's a very easy sales motion for them because it's attached to the software essentially, and the licenses, every chip company has to pay Synopsys or Cadence for something, and their contracts are very hard to get out of, but they're pretty flexible. If you want to buy IP or you want to buy software, they don't. That's a pretty flexible thing. So it's a good business for them to be in, and it's important. But I agree. That's a big part of the custom ASIC story is Synopsys and Cadence are participating in that. The Ansys deal is interesting though because for other reasons, I think this whole idea of real world physical modeling, it's this weird disconnect because almost everybody I talk to on the buy side on the street hates this deal. Yeah, it's really interesting, and some of it is the price. And I don't know much about Ansys, so I've heard it's expensive. I don't know, but I think it's more just like people don't really see the fit. But then you talk to the EDA companies, and they really, really believe in this. They need to be able to do physical world modeling. It's becoming more important for designing chips, especially as we get to things like backside power, and you start to have really weird thermal effects on their chips. And of course, heat is a big issue now in AI. And like being able to model that early on seems really useful in the semiconductor world. And certainly after Ansys, Synopsys announced for Ansys, Cadence and Siemens Mentor announced similar acquisitions, right, of other smaller companies in that space. And so it's we've talked to people at Synopsys. I talked to Sassine about it once at dinner. He made a really, really coherent argument for why it was really important for them to own Ansys. And it's weird to me that there's such a disconnect, because it's a pretty good argument he makes for why they needed to have it. And, we'll see. I certainly understand the basic premise. I think part of the issue is there's very little overlap between the two. Like only something like 5% of Ansys's revenue comes from semiconductors. The rest is modeling things in the real world. And I think that's what gave people it seems like a big diversification for Synopsys, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's a good fit. It does have a lot of non-semi customers.
Agreed.
The other thing that matters here too, this is going back to our China point. The sticking point on this deal was whether or not China would approve.
And there was a lot of concerns about it. Yeah,
both companies do a lot of business in China. There were a lot. I was hearing even as recently as like 3 months ago, there were people who thought it would never go through. And this is purely a function of geopolitics. And this adds to this thesis that China and the U.S. are trying to come up with a good deal for each other, or a deal. They're going to come up with a deal. This seems like it's another one of those data points that, there's something in the works.
Yeah. Okay. And then what was the other bit of news we were going to hit on briefly? That's right.
Chris Koopman was promoted to president of Marvell. Right. So interesting move. I don't think the management team there is going anywhere, but Chris Koopman's been a very solid contributor to Marvell for years. Yeah.
And that should, ultimately, I think everybody views that positively. Give him more responsibility. He's been a good executor and operator, and their business. They continue to come out and use very similar SAM numbers as Broadcom in terms of what they do in custom semis. So continued operations and execution there matter. So promote those people, give them more responsibility, and let them keep executing. All right. That's we'll wrap for this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you again next week.
Thank you, everybody. Click like, subscribe, tell your friends.